Hey folks, David Stewart here. Today we're going to talk about rings of power in Tolkien and in Stephen R Donaldson's Chronicles of Thomas Covenant. Now, why am I comparing these two? Well, it's because Donaldson actually invites this comparison. Thomas Covenant has his wedding ring when he enters the land, and it is quickly identified as a ring of white gold which contains wild magic which can affect the world and is very, very important. Let's start with Tolkien, though. So the Ring of Power in Tolkien, most of you should be familiar with how this works. It's Sauron's ring. It enhances his power while he wears it. It is separated from his body when he is defeated, but it becomes an artifact of evil, where whoever possesses the ring essentially becomes possessed by the ring. The ring exerts its will over their will. The will of the person is corrupted by the ring, and the desire to wield the power of the ring will be enough in some cases to corrupt and cause the downfall of otherwise noble individuals. Saruman, by his questing to achieve the ring and studying the designs of Sauron, falls into the temptation of evil himself, seeking the ring to use its power to further his own will or to order the world as he sees it. Likewise, whenever you have characters acting in fear of taking up the ring, when Gandalf says, I dare not take it, because through me it would wield a power too terrible to imagine, that the desire to pick up the ring, I would take this ring from a desire to do good, but through me it would wield a power too terrible to imagine. It's this idea that absolute power corrupts, or power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So the ring itself is a danger. It's a danger because it has power. That if you give power unto a person who is not fitting for that power, is not made to control that power, then that is something which destroys them and usurps their will and turns them into something evil. And you see this with all the different levels of people who possess the ring. Gollum, who's a rather pitiful and wretched character, is a very small kind of character who possesses a ring, and so it corrupts him in a way that's very small in a sense. Rather than making him some sort of warlord over men, it turns him into a creature of the shadows and survival and greed and lust and self-pity and wretchedness. Isildur, who is the first person to take the ring from Sauron, is corrupted by it through his own hubris at being a great ruler of men, that he thinks he can control the power of the ring and be wise about it, but the ring corrupts him through the desire to possess the ring right from the beginning, and then eventually betrays him to his death. So the desire to use power always ends in tragedy. That's one of Tolkien's messages. And so, of course, the only thing to do with the Ring of Power is not to use it, but to destroy it so that no one can use it, so that the evil of its power is dispersed and no one can be corrupted by it and no one can be brought under domination through the use of that power. Really, really important themes, very, very classic themes for the modern period and going back beyond that. I think one of the most impactful themes of the 20th century is the idea of the Ring of Power. It's really reverberated through a lot of our art in different ways. Now, Donaldson compares the ring in Thomas Covenant, who's Thomas Covenant's wedding ring, to the Ring of Power right away. We see it's in a context of a fantasy book. It's a ring of power. It's a ring that does magic somehow. The comparisons are obvious, but the meaning through that comparison gains a little bit and becomes something quite different from what Tolkien did with his ring. So the Ring of Power, or the Ring of Wild Magic in the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, is a thing which has an unpredictability to it. And that's something that is important, because while Thomas Covenant does not want to use the power of the ring, he is forced to use it on multiple occasions, and its effects are often different from what he expected. They are, in some cases, much worse than what he expected, but usually beneficial in ways that he didn't understand how they would be. So rather than Thomas Covenant being corrupted by a desire to possess the power of the ring, it's the opposite. He does not want to use the ring. He doesn't want to have the power, because for him to have the power, it would basically mean that he believes in the world and that the world has value, the land, the place that he's transported to. The big theme that runs throughout it is that he is surviving by refusing to believe in that which is fanciful and fantastic and that which is meaningful and wonderful. His whole life is about rejecting meaning, including his marriage. So his marriage falls apart when his wife leaves him when she finds out he has leprosy. He continues to wear his wedding ring as a reminder of the consequences of leprosy, that you can't fall into romanticism. You have to view the world in a stark and materialistic sort of way. When he's forced into the land, his ring acts in a way that is non-materialistic. It's literally magical. But he doesn't want to use it because that would admit that he believes the land is real and that it has value. There's also some other symbolism. As the story goes on, in the first book at least, the moon becomes red. The enemy turns the moon red, and his ring turns red in a reflection of that. So he's looking at the ring and he's seeing that the ring contains the dark power, just like how Sauron's ring contains a dark power to it. And so it's a very obvious thing to him that he shouldn't use the ring because it's under some sort of evil force, and it's reflecting the evil in the moon. But he's forced to use the ring in a couple of cases, and the result is not something that is necessarily bad. In some cases, it saves somebody, or at least like releases their body when he's like deep in a mine. And eventually, when he uses the power of the ring, it is to the benefit of the people around him. And his resistance to it, I think, also echoes into his own life, is that if he is able to have potency and he's able to have belief and he's able to affect change in the land, then he should be able to have belief and he should be able to have an effect on his own life in the real world. And that's something that he doesn't want to do. That's why he wears the ring. It's a reminder of his basically materialistic nihilism, his belief that survival is what matters and therefore you must do away with that which is symbolic or meaningful to you, that which has romantic attachment, that which prevents you from fully living the life of a leper in survival and all the things that he does to survive, constantly, keeping his furniture in a certain way so he never knocks his nose or never knocks his toes, things like that. So I think it's a really interesting comparison to look at those two rings. The other thing is what the ring represents to people. So the Ring of Power in Lord of the Rings, to all of the people who want to possess it, it represents the power to save that which they love. In the land, it also represents the power to save that which they love, but the people don't really want to possess it. They see it as this intimate item that's bound up with Thomas Covenant. And he's the one who has to use the wild magic to save the world. The difference between them, though, is that while people are looking to individually possess it, the people of the land are looking at the ring as a symbol of hope, something that could actually deliver them. And in subsequent volumes after the first one, they bring Thomas Covenant back from his world because they need the wild magic. They think they're going to need it for an upcoming war with Lord Fowl. There's also a little bit of a deeper connection there because his ex-wife calls him at the beginning of the second book saying that she needs him, and while she's saying she needs him on some level, he falls down and hits his head and gets transported back to the land. And he's obsessed over the fact that he got pulled away from this super important conversation where basically his inner self wanting his wife to need him and to want him, his desire to give in to belief, it was so profound in the real world that he gets pulled into the land and it upsets him. But of course, this symbolic ring of marriage in the real world of his wife needing him carries over into the imaginary world. They bring him to the land because they need him and they need the power of the white gold. So while they both represent power, both Sauron's ring and Thomas Covenant's ring, they represent different things to the people that are concerned, especially Thomas Covenant, because Thomas Covenant himself is trying to resist the use of power. Throughout the entire book, he acts passively because that's the only other option. Once the moon becomes red and his ring becomes red, he is acknowledging that they are acting according to the will of Lord Fowl, and he doesn't know how to resist that will except by refusing to participate, something which becomes impossible towards the end. He has to take action. He has to affect the world in a positive way. And that's a very interesting take on the ring. Rather than viewing the ring of power as something inherently evil or corrupting, that's something that Thomas Covenant sees as dangerous to his psyche rather than dangerous to his view of reality and his ability to survive, rather than dangerous to the world or corrupting and sinful on some level. It's an interesting reflection of what Tolkien did with his ring, what Stephen R. Donaldson does with Thomas Covenant's ring. So that's about all I have to say about that. Leave me your thoughts down below and what you think some of the meaning is behind the ring, particularly when the ring becomes red to reflect the red moon and the corruption of the power. I'd like to know some of your thoughts about what you happen to think that meant in that moment, if you've read the books, and if you haven't read them, that's okay too. If you're interested in my fantasy books, Water of Awakening, you can actually get the ebook for free if you join my mailing list. Otherwise, you can buy it on Amazon, I think, for 99 cents. Quite a deal for 99 cents. It's a big, thick fantasy book full of lots of crazy adventures. I rather enjoyed writing it, so check it out, and I'll see you guys next time.